The end of all creation is a marriage between Christ and the glorified beings whom he has redeemed by his own blood. That all creation should end at the marriage altar, that the parties should be God and man, with the angels as witnesses, is beyond science and can only be understood by those who have the foretaste of it already in their hearts. The true history of man begins and ends in a garden. The Lower Eden, which means delight, is a parable of the Upper Eden, the garden of God. See Revelation. There the bride at last meets her beloved, never to part again. A different story this, from that invented by the devil in hell, that man evolved from a disgusting past and suddenly became a poet, a philosopher, a musician, an artist, yet has no credible future. Satan hates man because he hates God in whose image man was originally created, and hence Satan has invented the fable of man's inglorious origin, and so has laid the foundations of modern unbelief. Man no longer has a credible future, nor has the universe which is his home. Modern unbelief has made men wholly insignificant, but the Bible has a different story to tell, a story which Satan hates because it involved him originally in his own ruin. The Bible assures us that man was made for God, to exhibit the divine likeness, and bear the divine glory. The fall of man did not quench that hope or forbid that destiny. God will bring a greater good out of dreadful evil, sorrow, pain and death. From man's ruined creation will spring a glorious bride, outshining the angels in her splendor. Eve was created from the wounded side of the man. She exists because of him and not he because of her. When the mystery of God is finished, she who exists only for Christ and who has no life but his life, who comes forth out of his sleep of death in the garden tomb, taken from his wounded side, his bride, his church, shall be brought unto him at the end of the days, and this shall be the glorious end of creation. Almost 2,000 years have passed since the resurrection and ascension of Christ. When will that cry be heard? But at midnight there was a shout, "Behold, the bridegroom! Come out to meet him." Matthew 25:6. From Adam to the call of Abraham was a remarkable approximation of 2,000 years. Likewise from the call of Abraham to Christ was approximately 2,000 years. Now from Christ to our own days is nearing 2,000 years. Long ago 6,000 years as the duration of man's probation was looked upon as indicated by the 6 days of creation. Then God rested from his work. It is certain that the 6,000 years of man have well nigh run their course. And a great apostasy is upon us. As in the first age of man, before the flood, Satan inspired Cain to build himself a city so as to preserve and advance his power over the world. So in the second age, after the deluge, he inspired Nimrod to make another foundation so as to centralize the power of evil, but God breathed upon the builders and scattered them. The Assyrian Nineveh was next built in the same vicinity only to meet a similar fate at the hands of the Chaldeans under Nebuchadnezzar. This extraordinary monarch, who marched in his pride around Babylon, the greatest city ever built on the earth by man, was brought low in the days of Daniel. His reason departed from him, and he became in his insanity a beast, until in the mercy of God he was restored, a better man than ever before, humble and wise, a believer in the true God, and wrote his confession that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and bestows it on whom he wishes and sets over it the lowliest of men. Daniel 4:17b. Babylon did not long survive his death, and the great city was reduced to ruins by Cyrus the Persian, the friend of Daniel and the benefactor of Israel, whose return to Jerusalem he benevolently decreed. But even while Babylon was at the height of its pride, another city was silently forming on the banks of another river, the Tiber, in the continent reserved for Japheth. They called it Rome, a city which in the providence of God was to reduce the whole world to order, and was destined to survive for many centuries until she too would crumble before the judgment of God. Its fate rocked the world, and nothing has been the same since. The Pax Romana having ended, peace was taken from the earth, and the history of the former Roman dominions has been a history of ruinous war, from that day to this. Yet Rome survived this disaster as a mysterious yet nonetheless real ecclesiastical empire, with its crowned head and proud pretension of being none other than the bride of Christ, though drunk with the blood of martyrs and righteous men. Our fathers closed the book of history there, for they thought the papal empire was the last and would endure to the coming of Christ. But our book of Revelation tells us otherwise. The 10 kings of Revelation 17 were to hate the whore of Babylon and destroy her. A new thing called democracy arose, the rule of the people. The French Revolution brought down the thrones of Europe and humbled the power of the popes. Nothing has been the same since. Science has become atheistic and created a psychology which, by postulating that man is an accident, an outgrowth of the brute, potentially destroys his moral status. The wheels of time revolve slowly, but, since Darwin, they have turned full circle and paved the way for universal atheism. Satan has discarded Babylon. No longer can that religious fraud hold the mind of man in bondage, and so, as according to the 7th vial, Babylon is overthrown. False religion, in which the slags of the Protestant Reformation have provided the last drops in the vile bowls which the whore used to pass around the nations, has lost its hold on the mind of men, as Satan moves on to the last phase of his permitted power. Open atheism, rationalism, the worship of the human mind, and the banishment of God and truth and the Bible, taking the place of the last great Babylon, is a direct satanic conspiracy to lead man to his own destruction and pull down on his own head the temple of pure knowledge. Beauty and art and harmony in music is departing from the human soul. Heathen rhythms and debased art forms, jungle melody, the beating of the tom-tom, long-haired men and naked women, shameless and obscene dance movements, foul language, lies and betrayals, family subversion, adultery, sex appeal, fornication, sodomy, robberies and misappropriations, violence, suicide, abortion, murder, rape, terrorism, all manner of abominable crimes, a rising tide of anarchy, rebellion and abandonment, are succeeding centuries of enlightenment and culture. Alongside the greatest scientific achievements of the entire history of man comes an impious abandonment to all the lowest instincts of depravity. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Luke 18:8b. But when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Luke 21:28. For this reason you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think he will. Matthew 24:44. Paradoxically, when our Redeemer comes, that will be a great day of gladness for the inhabitants of heaven and for those who have been redeemed from the earth. David the king saw that day from far, and wrote of it in that most amazing of Psalms, the 45th. There he drew, in inspired words, the picture he saw of the king, the bridegroom, and at his right hand the queen, in gold of Ophir. She will be led to the king in embroidered work, a sign of her virginity. She is reserved for him and for him alone, to whom she has come from the ends of the earth. Gold of Ophir is from the Indies. She comes to her wedding bearing with her the true riches of creation. All that was ever worthwhile on earth goes into her wedding garments. The sighs and the tears of believers are preserved and will be as jewels, which shine forever in the mansions of heaven. With what infinite patience and devotion have those exquisite embroidery tunics been woven on the loom of a life manufactured on earth. It will all be to the glory of the Redeemer, who will be acclaimed as worthy of it all. In sorrow and pain some of the finest tapestries have been wrought, and the palace of the king will be adorned with these precious tokens of love and devotion to him, whose love has won for him a bride, and whose sacrifice for her has been complete. He loved me and gave himself for me, will be her constant theme. Regarding the devotion to Jesus Christ and love for him, there is a remarkable verse which has an unmistakable reference to that supreme devotion of Mary at Bethany when she poured out her spikenard upon her Lord. In the Song of Solomon 1:12, we learn, "While the king was at his table, my perfume gave forth its fragrance." Mary anointed the Savior on the first day of the crucifixion week, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. John 12:3b. The connection with the Song of Solomon is beyond dispute. Mary acted for the church, without knowing it. The perfume of her great act fills another house greater by far than the dwelling at Bethany. Heaven is filled with the praise of the Lamb that was slain. God will have no glory which he does not earn, and no worship which he has not proved himself worthy to receive. Heaven will be one long and endless discovery of the perfection of his love, and as the earthly bride never tires of resting in the love of her beloved, so in heaven, the theme of the love of God in Christ for the church will never weary. To love and to be loved is the highest of all destinies, and we shall rest evermore in the fullness of that love, which is divine and which begets love in those who yield themselves to it. Our unworthiness to be loved only adds to the wonder of the sacrificial love of our glorious King. True love never reaches its goal, save by the road of travail and tears, of suffering and patient waiting. He, the heavenly lover, pays her dowry in the drops of his own blood. She, after the long night of waiting, symbolizing the Old Testament condition of the church, endures the cruel blows of the false watchmen of Israel in the darkened streets of the city, which had no room for him. That dark night of cruelty and shame proved the reality of her love for him. Still she groans and awaits the great moment of love's realization. She has waited long. So has he. But now time is running out. Let us take into account that salvation is more than the forgiveness of sin. It is that, but more than that. Salvation is only complete in the final union and marriage of Christ and his bride, when she, the completed church, is conducted by angelic courtiers through the palace of the King to where he waits at the altar of heaven. This was always the object of creation, a purpose which could be realized in no other way but by tears and blood, suffering and patient endurance. This is the great secret of the life of God. He would not reign alone. Eternal love must reach out to widen the area of blessedness to the utmost limit. God will have no final realization of the meaning and purpose of his own great life, for which he does not pay the supreme price. This is the wonder of all creation. God will not be satisfied with a mere legal reckoning with the revolt of creation. He himself must pay the price of love to the utmost limit, by descending to a condition in which he becomes the outcast of his own world. Only by this awful descent can it be known what divine love is. The cross is a token of that giving of himself and complete surrender to all that evil can do, hiding not his face from shame and spitting. The sin offering for his own creation. This new creation is the paradise of God, where God and man become one again. Creation becomes a song of victory and joy, another Eden, a garden of delight, a paradise of eternal love, where the river of life flows down and the celestial fruits of the tree of life are free for all. Here is the heavenly marriage. Here is the bridegroom and the bride. Here is our peace, our beauty, our home, our other self, our sweetness, our love. Here is the bride coming up from the wilderness leaning on her beloved. He to her and she to him in a oneness of love, a joy, a rest, a peace, which can know no ending.